Okay, today we're going to be talking about section 5.5, and it's on inverse trig functions. So first of all, let's just remind ourselves, because we're going to use this later. How do we remember where are the trigonometry functions positive? And if you remember, we had a way of reminding ourselves where we said all students take calc. And so all signs are positive in the first quadrant. Only sine is positive in the second quadrant. Tangent is positive in the third quadrant, and cosine is positive in the fourth quadrant. So now let's look at this. This whole idea of right here, where we have these arc signs, it gets really confusing. We're introducing a new word, arc sine, and then it's kind of the same thing as saying sine inverse or cosine inverse, same thing for arc cosine. What it's saying, and it's going to put a number here. This isn't hashtag. This is actually for a number. So it's saying it'll say the arc sine of some number, some value equals x. What you need to be thinking at this point is that, oh, they want to know for what angle. So we're always looking for an angle here, an angle measure. For what angle is the sine of that angle equal to the number they gave us? Same thing is, sorry about that, for here, for what angle they're asking here is cosine of that value equal to the number they gave us. And then the same thing here, it's still for what angle. So we're looking for an angle. So in here, it's kind of like what I'm saying for what angle tangent of that angle equals x. And it's like we're looking for this angle. All right. In other words, we're saying here, tangent of what equals the number was given. So let me give you an example, and hopefully it'll be a little bit more clear. Now they're asking about the intervals between 0 and 360. So what happens is there's a lot of times two answers that are correct, and I'll show you that. I'll show you that example here in a minute. So in the first example here, arc cosine of 1 equals x. What they're really asking you, the cosine of what? So we're gonna fill this in. Of what equals 1? That's what we're asking ourselves. We're cosine of what equals 1? Okay. Well, what you'd first have to do yourself is you have to say, okay, cosine is 1. Where does cosine equal 1? And you kind of have to think that through. Where cosine is positive, first of all, for cosine to be a 1, it has to be a quadrangle. So it's almost like you go back to what we just took a test on, and we say, well, I know I got cosine equal to 1. Usually cosine a lot of times was either square root, of 3 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, or 1/2. Where it equaled 1 was on the quadrangles. So when we had this, all right? And if you remember, cosine is your x. So where is your x equal to 1? Well, your x is equal to 1 right here. Where is that? That is the answer. It's either at 0 degrees or you could say 360. I don't care which you see it is. It's like some people are like, oh, that's always 360. Oh, that's always 0. I don't care which. So either 0 or 360. That's where the cosine, the x, equals 1. Now let's look at the next example. For this example, now we're asking ourselves the question, the sine of what value equals 1/2? That's what sine inverse means. It's the same thing as arc sine. So we go back and forth. It used to be that we couldn't do those inverse. We couldn't do these like exponential when we did printing. So we needed a way to show that sine inverse, and so that's why we came up with this idea of arc sine. It's the same thing. They're used interchangeably. Sometimes you'll see sine inverse, sometimes you'll see arc sine. It honestly depends on the printer of a book or instructor. So now we're saying to ourselves the sine of some angle equals 20. All right, it's kind of like name that angle. Not equals 20, sorry, equals 1/2. Okay, sine is 1/2. All right, so first thing I have is, hey, this is positive. Where is the sine positive? The sine is positive in the first and in the second quadrant. All right, so my two options right here is that either I have an angle like this, or an angle like this, my sine is my y. So it's either here or here that is 1/2. Okay, for this to be 1/2, what would it be across from? What angle would this have been across from? Well, it would have been across from a 30-degree angle. I memorized that for the last test. That's right. So it's a 30-degree angle that's there. So what could this be? It's either going to be here where it's like, oh, it could be a 30-degree angle that we were talking about. This angle, though, is not so easy to see, and I'm going to redraw it down here. Here's the angle again, where this is a 30-degree reference angle. I'm not asking for the 30-degree reference angle. Now we have to like work backwards, like what is if the reference angle is 30 degrees in the second quadrant, what was my original angle? My original angle, it's kind of like the rest to make this 180. I actually do this in my head, 180 minus 30. Oh, my original angle was 150 degrees. This would have been 150 degrees right here. So my answer is 150 degrees or 30 degrees. And so that's what we do is we actually have that two long answers for this problem. All right, let's go to the next one. Next problem here is what is the arctangent of 1. Again, don't let that fact of tangent or arc throw you off. It's saying the tangent of some angle, we're finding angles in this section, equals 1. Tangent is y over x. So for it to equal 1, the y had to be the same as the x. Not necessarily both of them 1, but whatever was the y was the x. The other thing I think about is tangent is positive in the first quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So I'm saying, okay, either my triangle looks like this or looks like this. And hopefully you're kind of thinking to yourself, hey, the only time it was the same over the same was back when we had a 45-degree triangle, because then we'd have square root of 2 over 2 over square root of 2 over 2. That's the only time we got tangent equal to 1. Here, square root of 2 over 2, it would be negative, and this one would be negative square root of 2 over 2, which would still give me a positive 1. Oh, so that angle had to be either a 45-degree angle if it was in the first quadrant, and in this third quadrant, it's like I have to travel here from the beginning all the way here. So it's like I went and I traveled 180 degrees here and then 45 more. 180 plus the 45 more is 225. So you're going to say, oh, it could be 45 degrees or 225 degrees if it was that angle in the third quadrant. All right, let's go on to another one. And these take some practice. We're going to take a couple days on this, so it's okay if it's the first time you hear it, you see it, it's not so clear. We'll get better at it. What if we don't say, oh, we're going to just continually stick in the unit circle? What if we kind of just try to figure it out on our own? And that works out too. So tangent here equals 1 over square root of 3. So tangent is positive. So the first thing I think to myself, well, first thing I think is I'm looking for some angle where when I take the tangent of that angle, I get 1 over the square root of 3. Okay, and then the second thing I think to myself is that I am dealing in the first quadrant because it's a positive and the third quadrant. So it's this angle here and this angle here that I'm trying to find. I'm guessing it's not a 45. We just solved one for a 45 and it was 1. So it's not 45 degrees because the tangent we just figured out of 45 degrees is 1. So the opposite side here we know is 1 and the adjacent side is square root of 3. Well, we're used to having kind of square root of 3. Where we see square root of 3 is when it was square root of 3 over 2 and we had 1 over 2. Now, couldn't I do that to both of these? Remember how before what we did is we said, oh, if you have 1/2 and square root of 3 over 2, we just got rid of the 2's? We can add them right back. So actually, this is our values here. For our x and our y. Well, what was that directly across from? It was directly across from a 30-degree angle. Oh, okay, that's a 30-degree angle. This is a 30-degree reference angle. And so a 30-degree reference angle, if I started here and said, okay, I'm going to go completely 180 and then add another 30. So I'm just going to go, oh, what's 180? And I'm adding another 30. That would be 210 degrees. So my two angles that is the answer to this question is, it could be 30 degrees if it's in the first quadrant, excuse me, or 210 degrees if it's in the third quadrant. So your answers are going to be usually two different values, one for the first quadrant, one for the second quadrant. All right, I need to make these a little bit bigger. I'm going to bring that down a little. There we go. So now we're dealing with here, what is the cosine of negative 2 over 2? When I see that negative 2 over 2, I just can't help but think 45 because I've kind of burned it into my head that across from a 45-degree angle is square root of 2 over 2. All right, so first thing I'm thinking to myself, cosine of what angle equals this negative square root of 2 over 2? If it's negative and it's cosine, all right, cosine is positive in the first and the fourth quadrant. So it's negative in the second and the third quadrant. This is where it's negative. So my triangle could be here, or my triangle could be here. That could be either triangle there. So I'm guessing it's a 45. I'm kind of going to check my theory. 45, this would be square root of 2 over 2. This would be negative square root of 2 over 2. And here, my cosine would be my adjacent here. Oh, that works. It would be negative square root of 2 over 2. Still, this one, it would work too if it was a 45. Hard part is we're not talking about 45-degree angles. We are talking about two possibilities here. One possibility is I'm in the first quadrant, and I'm here, and it's a 45-degree reference angle. The other possibility, let me get more space here, is I'm in the third quadrant, excuse me, and here I have a 45-degree angle. All right, so for the first one, what degree would be here in green? Well, I really just have to say I don't want to go quite 180. I want to take away 180, or if I went at 180, I want to take away the 45. So I'm going to go 180. I'm going to take away the 45 there. What I get is 135. So that's what this angle is. Here, for my green, it's like I want to go 180, and now I want to add 45 degrees to it. Now I have 225. So my answer to this question was 135 and, I guess it'd be an or, 225. That's the answer. Those are the two angles that satisfy this condition here of cosine of what two angles equal negative square root of 2 over 2. So the second type of problem, and actually we're going to probably do this more on the second day, we'll get to in a minute. I'm actually going to make another video.